amendment, which is the addition of an additional option for returning to school. Originally, we had, you went back to school face-to-face, or you enrolled in Hernando eSchool. We met on several occasions with the task force, and we've included an additional option, which kind of lines up with what some of our surrounding counties are offering, and it's called the digital home learning option. And you have a summary of that in front of you, and it's up on the screen. We've been kind of communicating this to parents. We did listen to parents and a lot of their feedback, and in speaking with several of them, this is something that was requested, and we decided, let's go ahead and research that and see how we can make it happen. So our technical assistance paper plan for the digital home learning really aligns with exactly what the state is requiring us to submit in their innovative learning plan template that we have to submit. So we did make sure that we have all the assurances in our digital home learning plan that aligns with what the state is requiring. In a nutshell, and I'll do the summary of it, students remain connected with their actual school. They don't have to enroll in Hernando eSchool. If I'm enrolled in Spring Hill Elementary, I'm going to have a teacher from Spring Hill Elementary teaching me all day long through the computer, instead of being in school face-to-face, or instead of enrolling in Hernando eSchool, where it's pretty self-motivated and self-directed. So that's the biggest change. It's really important to know that this is going to basically be like you're sitting in a classroom. If you're in elementary, you're going to follow whatever the schedule is for that grade level during the day. If you're in secondary, you're going to follow your actual periods 1 through 6 or 1 through 7 and be online every single period receiving that direct instruction. Attendance will be taken for each period. We'll follow the student handbook as far as attendance and grading. And Ms. Drenth has come up with a plan for still providing meal locations for those students to go in and receive their meals, and actually providing them multiple meals at one time so that they're not having to go on a daily basis to pick that up. The biggest thing to point out here is we will not be providing devices for all of those families choosing this option or eSchool option. There just is not enough devices in the system right now in order to be able to accommodate that. In our previous fourth 9 weeks, it's important to know that we had close to 700 devices either not returned or damaged out of the 4,000 that we distributed. So we are in the process of replenishing that, but we needed to look at those figures. Are there questions?
Lisa?
Yes.
Are we able to recover those?
We are working on it, yes. And those that we are not able to recover, we are completing the notices of obligations for the families so that they have to take care of that debt before they are allowed to participate in some of our extracurricular activities, which is what our policy says.
Excellent.
Yes.
It's my understanding that we are extending the parents' decision date till July 24th.
Yes.
And that we must turn into DOE our plan by July 31st.
Correct.
So in looking at this option, again, which I think will probably be a very popular option, do you think, and I know you don't know and you won't know till after July 24th, that we will have to hire additional teachers, or say there's 3 second grade teachers? How will the decision be made on who's going to be teaching the online?
So, can't answer all of it, but we did have a principals meeting last Thursday, and we went over this plan with them and gave them several scenarios and samples of master schedules for them to go back to their building and start thinking about what that's going to look like. We won't know until we have the numbers, so we may have to get a little creative if we don't have enough students signed up for any one particular class to warrant a full teacher. So they know that they're going to have to get a little creative with that. We also have the surveys that were done with staff as a starting point, and that survey was done before this third option
Right.
came out.
Right.
So some of that may change, but at least we have an idea of those that may be interested in teaching on a digital platform that we can look at.
But there may not be, say, the number of teachers at a school may not line up with the need for this particular online learning. I know I have taught online, and I know that I would spend a whole summer preparing to teach online when I had to teach a class in the fall, or at least 3 or 4 months in advance. This isn't something that just happens. It does take a lot of preparation. And, that concerns me that our teachers are not going to have a lot of preparation time, although, not to say that they can't rise to the challenge, because I think we've proven they can. But it does concern me because I know how much work goes into planning when you have to teach online.
Absolutely. And so just to talk to a few of your points, we are going to be using in this digital home learning option Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
Which is something that we already have in the district and
Okay.
became pretty familiar with in this since March. And so we also have professional development that have come along with using Microsoft Teams. Joe and his group had gotten a $40-something thousand grant with Microsoft for them to help us through the training and the setup and everything that we need for Microsoft Teams. Ms. Clark, Paula Clark, had developed and is working with the trainers at Microsoft, and she has several dates already lined up. They even start this week for training that teachers can take. Regardless of whether or not you're teaching a digital class at this point, if you want to take advantage of getting ahead and going through some of those Microsoft Team trainings, they are starting this week. And I spoke with her this morning about looking into additional trainings the first 2 weeks of August that can be offered for those that want to take it. There's also an administrative training for Microsoft Teams.
Okay, now
And the nice thing is it's free. So the Microsoft Teams is free and the training is taken care of.
Sure. Now, will the testing be done through Canvas for this option, or has that been decided, or?
We're just using Microsoft Teams, so testing for just any test, formative or summative tests are you talking about, or are you asking about diagnostic?
Any type of quizzes or tests or whatever?
Yes, so the teachers will be able to use the file upload in Microsoft Teams for students to be able to take their tests. There's also a lot of other resources that students, like they use it in the class anyway, to be able to answer those questions online, and then the teacher gets the results right away.
So it'll strictly be Microsoft Teams then?
Yes, but as we found out this last 9 weeks, teachers found a lot of other resources. Seesaw was a really popular one for the elementary level.
Right.
And some other platforms in order to be able to have students show their knowledge. And so I would imagine that those teachers would continue to use those additional resources for kids to take advantage of. And Microsoft Teams is almost like the platform and allows for the face-to-face instruction that occurs, almost like Zoom. But with our Microsoft Teams, we can kind of eliminate the issues that we had with Zoom bombing and things like that. So that was one of the reasons. It also talks to our Skyward system. So when schedules are built in Skyward, they can actually upload to Microsoft Teams, and when a teacher logs on, it'll show each one of their classes as a team, and they'll be able to access it that way. Same with the student, and it's all through our single sign-on.
Okay, so like iReady, will they be able to access that?
Yes.
Also?
Yes,
Okay.
right now they can access iReady from home anyway, and we have a meeting this week to discuss what the actual diagnostic's going to look like, because, parents don't want to, if they're going to choose this option, they don't want to bring them into the school
For
anyway.
any testing.
Yeah,
right,
so
for any
coming up with the
testing.
logistics of what that's going to look like.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Sure.
I'm not happy with the starting dates of the schools, and I know we're going to have this discussion, but if we push forward for a starting date, say the 31st, would that give you enough time to recoup and to put your programs in position, and would give you the time you need to get it done? Or the second thing is, if we decide to move forward with a date like that, would you be able to extend the date that they can make a decision which way they're going to go, or would it be the same date? Because your date is for Friday.
Right.
And so would that be pushed out if we decide to move forward with a different date?
So to answer your first question, yes, we can work within whatever time frame that you allow us. And as far as the deadline, the sooner the better, so that schools can actually start getting those numbers. We anticipate that once it goes live and they can make their choices on a daily basis, we'll be forwarding that information to schools so that they can have up-to-date daily numbers throughout this week to really be building their schedules.
What I'm concerned about, too, Lisa, is the fact that the COVID figures are continuing to rise, and we don't seem to have a control on it at this time. I don't know when we will.
Right.
And the fact that if we move forward and it continues to rise without showing a different date, for instance, let's just go on the example that we move forward on the 31st. That means that the board will have one meeting before, 2 weeks earlier, to figure out whether we're going to push it out or what we're going to do or start on that date. Things could get worse, and I know we have to be in compliance with the state, but that still puts us within the parameters.
Mr. Stratton.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I'm going to advocate for keeping the date, the deadline, the same for parents, just for the reason that Ms. Cropley said. There's an enormous amount of planning that has to happen at the school level, and the more time we have, the better job we'll do. That doesn't, though, prevent a parent's situation from changing, and we will work with the parent that if they need to move from one modality to another, but we still need to have a baseline to start our preparation. And you mentioned staffing. We're going to have to work hard at making sure we're covering everything with the staff we have. We are going to hold longer than we normally do. Usually we move things around in the first 10 days to adjust. We're going to put a holding pattern there for a little while. The one caveat that will change that would be if we come in less FTE than we are staffed at, overall total number. Take that out of the equation, and we're going to allow principals to use the staff that they've been allocated with to manipulate and move around and make sure we're meeting the needs of all students before the district gets involved, other than adding, but before we get involved with any kind of movement of allocations like we do each year. So we're prepared to extend that out even as far as the first 9 weeks to make sure everybody's covered.
And we can always call an emergency meeting if it starts to look like things are bad. I mean, it's not like we have to turn in the plan by July 31st, but whatever start date the board decides on, we always will have that option, if things worsen, to look at
Absolutely.
the situation. It's not like what we turn in on July 31st is in concrete. I mean, it should be close.
It's
but-
an ever-changing plan.
Right,
There are
right.
some definite pieces of the plan that the state is requiring by executive order. That I can't change, or we can't change for that matter. But we can discuss those when we talk about the return date, the implications it might have. But certainly, we could meet as many times as we need to based on the current situation. We all are here to try to make the best decision given the circumstances we have.
Lisa,
Yes.
go ahead.
Any other questions on that? I just wanted to share, one of our task force members had come up with a matrix that we can put on our website as well that kind of gives parents a bird's eye view of the differences in the three options. So you have a copy of that for your review as well. And the big thing is to really be communicating that this looks different than the last 9 weeks. It is intense. It is just as rigorous as being in a classroom where you are expected to really be on all day following your schedule. So that's the biggest piece of communication that needs to happen with families so they understand it. And then you also have, and this is for a summary for you all that Ms. Martin had come up with, It kind of gives you a snapshot of what's happening in each of those components from the return to school plan, which outlines some of the highlighted areas in the plan when you are talking with the general public as far as what we're doing within our schools. So the majority of this is about face-to-face and what's happening in our schools, and then it also has the additional 2 options at the bottom. So that's another piece of communication.
Sure. I know many parents have sent me plans from other states, for instance, North Carolina, where half the students go Monday, Wednesday, half go Tuesday, Thursday, and then online on Friday. But it's my interpretation, and maybe Mr. Alfonso, Mr. Stratton, that we cannot consider an option like that because we're required to offer a 5-day traditional school day. Is that correct? In my understanding.
The executive order is very clear, and it states that at least 5 days a week we will open up for students in the traditional manner. There's no caveat at this time for staggered or approach whatsoever or rotating approach. So we open the doors 5 days a week, and whichever parents want to send them there, we have to be there for them.
Dusty had a question.
Yeah, Lisa, is there a limitation on how many students can take the distance home learning?
No.
Everybody can do it?
Yep.
Anything else, Lisa?
I don't, not unless anybody has any further questions.
Do you have questions? Kay?
I have a question, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask the question and get the answer, but several parents talked about their students not being able to do IB or ACE if they opt to engage in distance learning. Can you clarify that for me and for
Sure.
all of us?
So right now, we have spent some time looking at some of our specialized programs and specialized classes because of the requirement of the certification of the teacher, and it gets, in particular with IB, getting into 11th and 12th grade and only having 1 class available. So they are looking at the schedules, but there may be a chance that it is just face-to-face or just online. And so we did put the caveat in there. Some classes just may not be available through that digital learning. But we are going to do our best to preserve those programs as much as possible because it's important. They've worked really hard. And even if it's available, everybody can probably do digital learning. And then we'll see what we can do for those that are in face-to-face.
Okay.
So getting creative is really going to be the key. But without having those numbers,
Right.
it's really hard to say which ones can be done both.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And added to that is the understanding that the teacher has to be qualified, certified in order to teach the course. So that will help as parents think about scheduling and how we are proceeding. So,
Absolutely.
Are there other questions?
Yes, Lisa, just one
Jimmy?
more question, if I can follow up. On the buses
Yes.
and the maintenance of the buses and also in the maintenance of the cafeterias, will we be able to have enough equipment, enough personnel to handle that job?
As far as I know, I think Ralph and Lori,
Well,
yes.
Yes.
They say yes.
okay, and then as far as air conditioning filters, anything that has to be done as far as keeping the air clean in the school, since we can't open our windows and the heat is so intense, if you could, we'd all fry. Is there anything being done as far as the filters in certain schools? I know we have older schools where we can't do it. I've had a discussion with Sean on that, but are we moving forward with those type of enhancements?
So I do know, Sean can speak to this better, but I do know that there's going to be a special filtration system in the area where the clinic is, wherever that may be on our school campuses, to purify the air, specifically in those areas. But I know that Sean's team, I don't know if you want to speak to the actual filters of the air conditioning, but they're on a rotated basis as far as replacement anyway, so I'm not sure what the requirements of that are.
The biggest thing isn't just the filtration, it's the airflow. So what we do is we're ramping up the airflow the best that we can with our systems.
Okay.
Our systems are designed to operate at a certain maximum capacity, and that's all we can move it up to. it's not as easy as just changing out and putting in a better filter because it will restrict the airflow. And right now we want more airflow.
Well, I've had this question aimed at me as to how we're going to do this, so I appreciate that you're bringing this up and explaining it. What about in the new schools where we have new air conditioners, new HVACs? Is it possible to do it there as far as any filters for the filtration system where you would be able to even enhance that, where the air would be a lot purer?
Again, it's with the airflow. We have to increase the airflow. A new school compared to an old school, there isn't any benefits other than just newer equipment. But schools are designed for certain capacities, and without completely redesigning and getting different equipment, or your test and balance is going to be off. It's a major task to completely redesign these systems.
Okay.
You can only bring them up to their maximums, which will definitely be beneficial.
Let me ask another question, if I can, on the classrooms that we're going to have, and the teacher's going to be in the classroom for a long period of time. Will we be able to set the classrooms up and take some of the equipment out of there where we can get a 6-foot spacing between the kids? And second question is, in the busing situation, where they come into the buses, they're coming in through one door, leaving out the same door. I understand we're going to have face masks and also, the plastics that go there that would help that. But would that be a big help, or is there anything else we can do to protect our bus drivers?
Well, we're going to use the face mask and the face shield. It's going to be up to the bus driver, which one they choose. We have the hand sanitizer stations in the buses and the frequent disinfecting of the buses and sanitizing of the buses. We can only bring the children in the one door that's designed to bring them in and out. There's no 2 entrances or 2 exits on the bus. As far as the classroom, that will be up to the principals to move the desks the best that they can in the rooms. I know there's limitations, but each school is going to have a different answer for that.
Well, how will we be able to keep the kids in their seats? I mean, I've ridden in the buses, and we have assigned seats, and they're scattered all over the buses and having a party. How will we be able to control that?
The best that we can with the bus drivers. Hopefully the children respect the bus drivers. The bus drivers do an excellent job.
They do.
And I'm sure they'll continue to do that. And hopefully there'll be a little bit more respect for the bus drivers and the students understanding the situation. And hopefully they won't put the driver into a compromise.
And in the cafeterias, we're going to be able to serve the food and then keep them separated there where they'll be able to have it in their classrooms or in a spot in the lunchroom where they still have the social distancing?
Again, each school has a little bit different scenario. Lori and her team have come up with an excellent plan for distancing and for moving the kids through without having to necessarily stand in line forever. So we have carts, we have different things in place to keep it flowing and having the children separated in the cafeterias.
Okay, the reason I'm asking this, there's a lot of people who are listening and they want to know the answers, and they text me, but you guys are the experts, and I just want to, get you to clarify it for them. And I do want to thank you, Lisa, for putting this together. This is just terrific, very informative, and thank you.
So, Mr. Lodato, I want to chime in on this. We continuously look at what products are out there and what may work best in our situations. I know we're looking at different sanitizing means. Again, there's a lot out there, and not everything is right for necessarily a school setting, but we're going to continue to improve in that area and continue to invest in that area and make sure. But the one thing I want to make sure that the public is well aware of, schools are not designed for social distancing, period.
I know.
The words are where feasible. And I know that we keep saying that, but I want to be clear that there is not going to be a 6-foot spacing between students all day long. That's just not going to happen. It won't. And even in classrooms, we're not going to get to 6 feet in some classrooms. It's just not going to happen. We're going to do our absolute best to set them up. Some of our newer buildings, our newest schools, have the smallest classrooms. Some of your older ones have very large ones, so it might be feasible there. I just want everybody to go into this and be well informed that there are going to be times in a school that you are not social distancing, and that's why my recommendation is the mask as well.
Well, I don't disagree with you, John. The only thing that I'm saying is that, the safety is what's really important to all of us. I mean, we're all here together with the parents and the teachers, but if we would be able to allow them a little more time, that's why I'm asking that we push that starting date to the 31st, to give us the time we need to make sure the schools are totally prepared.
Safety is paramount, I would agree.
Mr. Arnold, I know schools all over the country are ordering, and I think I've probably forwarded 50 emails to you every time I get somebody who has a new procedure, a new piece of equipment. In terms of what we've ordered, have we received what we need to start school, or are we waiting on items, or where are we? Because I'm sure every school in the country is ordering some of the same things that we are.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix. Some of the things we've ordered have come in, and some others have not. We've been on a back order for almost 3 months on some things. So we get small. If we ordered, just for instance, 300 cases of something, we might get 50 to 100 cases that come in. So they're trickling in every day. So hopefully our goal is by the start of school we'll have everything that we need. And just to rest assured that with the disinfecting of schools, this is something that normally happens anyway. So we do have all of the hand sanitizer and the disinfecting equipment that we need. The things we're waiting on are just additional things to help improve the situation. But we do have the basics that are needed for keeping the schools clean and disinfected.
Great, thank you.
Lisa, just to reiterate, if a student goes to e-school, they have to finish the term. But if they go do the distance home, they can switch back at time?
Yes. So eSchool, their courses on Canvas are set up for semester courses. If we go to this digital home learning, we are going to ask that they stick with it for a 9-week period just for staffing purposes and planning purposes. But that doesn't mean that if there are not extenuating circumstances that we can't be fluid with that date. And we put into the plan that it would require a parent conference with the administrator, and the administrator would be able to decide with the parent what is going to be the best setting for the student. So it has a little bit more ability to be fluid than eSchool option.
Thank you.
I know that we voted to do away with reduced schedules for seniors, and I talked to Mr. Stratton just briefly about that. Again, a reduced schedule would be less students. However, the planning went forth not to have reduced schedules for seniors, which means staff was planning to teach additional courses. On those reduced schedules, can students do dual enrollment courses also? And that's what I think I would encourage, maybe.
Yeah, there are still 2 ways to have a reduced schedule.
Okay.
And that is
Okay.
either you're duly enrolled with PHSC,
Right.
something like that,
Right.
or an OJT program, and you meet the criteria for the OJT program, but there will still be students with reduced schedules that are in those scenarios. And that's the way it used to be years ago.
Right.
We did have kids that were on a reduced schedule years ago for those 2 reasons. I think that's the only 2 that I know of, Ms. Crump.
That would be a choice for seniors. Okay, great, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Only a comment, Susan, and this is related to spatial issues in classrooms and in schools. And last week I was in 2 of our buildings, and I recognize we have lots more than 2 buildings. But what I found was the leadership in those 2 buildings was working really hard to manage spatial issues and distance and being very creative about what can be moved around and how students can be placed in rooms and those kinds of things. So I'm sharing that because I wanted the record to reflect how diligently our staff is working to provide for the health and safety of our students as well as the staff.
Yes. If I can, just one more thing on the reduced schedule that Linda's talking about. I've had a lot of parents come up and ask, well, my son only has 3 hours left of classes with COVID and the situation we have now. Is there any way we can revert back to where it was and then bring it back after we're all clear with this COVID issue? Where the kids, if only have three classes, why should we keep them in there for 6 classes if they have the classes that will qualify them to graduate?
Right.
Just a question I'd like to throw at you.
Yes. Well, that decision doesn't necessarily lie with me, but I have had that question as well.
Yeah,
I think that's
a temporary
something-
measure, Lisa. It's not something that we would do forever.
Right.
But during these trying times, maybe we can just adjust that and go back to where we were, and then, once it's all clear, as Linda's saying, it would enhance it. I'm sure she's had the same phone calls I've had. And so it would really help the situation for our parents.
Jimmy, that's something that I think we can discuss a little bit later.
Okay, Susan.
Moving through the agenda, I'm certain it will come up. We've all had comments sent to us about that, so that's one of those things that I would appreciate if we would wait and get through our 2 assignments that we have on our agenda, then we can move forward with other recommendations or possibilities. If you don't mind, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then, any other questions regarding this agenda item 4452? If none, let's go ahead, if someone would make a motion and a second, please. Any other discussion? Let's vote then. The plan is approved 5-0, again with the understanding it is a fluid plan. We may see alterations come to us at any point in time, so thank you very much, Lisa, and everyone who's worked on this. The next item, agenda item is 4467, review and tentative approval of policies regarding face coverings. Mr. Stratton?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Yes, these are policies that I would like to bring forward for the board to consider. I'm going to ask Ms. Michaelika to come up too, and she can help answer any questions you may have in regards to what it might look like at the school level. Based on feedback, based on the information that I look at out there and hear about from the CDC and Health Department, I am making the recommendation that we make masks mandatory. Now, the questions that I'm receiving are, what does that look like? Well, my recommendation is a mask is to be worn if you cannot socially distance, if you're in a place where you cannot socially distance. So if it is a situation where social distancing can occur, the mask can come off, obviously. I know one county's called it mask breaks, those kinds of things. The other question I'm receiving a lot is if my student has medical challenges where a mask is not appropriate, we can discuss a shield. It's really face coverings, not mask. Face coverings, we can discuss other options, but there will be a medical waiver built in. I think I used that terminology correctly, Ms. Michaelika. A medical waiver built in for those persons that cannot wear a mask. But from there, we open it up to any questions we might have for Ms. Michaelika or myself.
Gina, do you want to go ahead
Sure.
with the...
So the document, good morning, by the way. Sorry, jumping right into this. The document that you have in front of you, I met with multiple administrators to talk through what this would look like for students in particular. And Karen had helped us as well in organizing all of this information. So when we worked on this was from the student perspective. This is a guide for families. Depending on where the board goes today, we will take this information and also make this user-friendly for our administrators, which that can easily happen as well. We did look at our surrounding counties when putting this together and what other districts are doing. So that second page there after the cover sheet walks families through the requirement for face coverings and also when face coverings are not required. So when students are eating or drinking, when it has an impairment due to an existing health condition, when social distancing is happening, and we kind of outline that as we go through this document. For students that are hearing impaired, where, a mouth needs to be visible, when it is when a teacher and student, we also looked at our pre-K and kindergarten classes, and there are times during the school day where students need to be able to see their teacher's mouth, and the teacher needs to see, and if it impedes instruction in any way, then the mask would not be worn during that time. And then, of course, during recess and PE, when social distancing is happening. We also, like Mr. Stratton said, at the bottom of this document, we talked about those mask breaks. We all know from wearing these that you get very hot. And when you take it off, you have that, like, wow, I can breathe again feeling, right? So we really put, when we talked about this, we kept in mind the age of our students as well. And that's something that we probably would like, to discuss today. When you have a 4 or 5-year-old with a mask on, they do need those breaks. So that is in here as well. Under the responsibilities, we talked about, again, that students are required to have masks, face coverings on when on school property, and that the district will be providing 2 cloth face coverings to our students. As we move forward into the next page and go through that protocol, we'll talk a little bit more about the disposable masks. And then it goes through, acceptable face coverings, and sharing is prohibited, and those kinds of things. There will be a limited supply of disposable masks available for emergency situations throughout the day, and that's where we put in those brief face covering breaks will happen as well. In regards to athletics, we are taking direction from the FHSAA in regards to that, pretty much like we have in there for recess and PE and those kinds of things. For lost or damaged, while the face covering requirement is in place, there will be a limited supply of disposable masks available for those emergency situations. Communication. Every attempt will be made to ensure that students and parents understand the importance of wearing the face coverings, and the district will work with families to identify the more appropriate learning path if a face covering cannot be worn, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then at the bottom there, the accommodations and exemptions. So for students that have a documentation from a health provider that they have is a medical condition that prohibits them from wearing a face covering, they can bring that to the school, and for those students, they would not have to wear a face covering. Also, students that have a disability where it's documented in their IEP or 504, as a result of that disability, if the student is not able to wear a face covering, we would ensure that it's in there. If an IEP or 504 meeting needs to happen to make sure appropriate documentation is there, we will move forward with that as well. And then, like Ms. Cropley had gone over, students are responsible for wearing them on the bus, the school bus. On the next page, we talk about expectations and consequences. And again, we did look at multiple districts when we were putting this together. And one of the things, that we noticed is you had districts where, there were non-disciplinary consequences, so to speak, where they would move to a different option, and others had, consequences for not wearing a face covering. So we had a lot of conversation around that. We also wanted to keep this as simple as possible for our schools, for our students and families. So this outlines the steps that will take place when a student repeatedly fails to comply with the face covering requirement. So step 1, the student will receive a verbal reminder from the administrator, guidance counselor. Again, we had a lot of conversation around the 5-year-old that doesn't come to school with a face covering, and the senior that doesn't come to school with a face covering, right? So those verbal reminders, having some conversation, and the student will be provided with a disposable face covering. Step 2, the student the student will receive parent contact, so the administrator will reach out to the parent, and the student will be given a disposable face covering for step 2. Again, conversation will happen with the family. And step 3, parent conference will happen at the school level so that we have documentation that happened. The covering will be provided, and that's when we're going to start talking to the family about consideration for a digital or virtual option. Again, taking into consideration the entire situation. You have a 5-year-old coming to school with no face covering. That's not really the responsibility of the child. It's really more of the family versus, a high school student who is just not complying for various reasons. And then step 4, we felt like was a violation of safety. Like all other violations in our student code of conduct, there would be in-school suspension for 1 to 3 days. Again, this is under the discretion of the administrator. So, if it's, I've seen Johnny 4 times this week, he's a junior in high school, and let's, oh yeah, I forgot my mask, or, whatever. For the safety of other students, we've had the parent conference, we've talked about this. The student may receive in-school suspension for 1 to 3 days with social distancing. Again, the contact with the family, and that's when that final decision is going to happen in regards to an alternate setting, educational setting for that student. Again, when reading other policies from other districts, there's a lot of things that can take place in regards to face coverings. Insubordination, whatever, it can turn into these other things, just like that sometimes happens with dress code. And so you see there at the bottom, the student code of conduct applies to all situations involving the requirement of wearing face coverings. We will, turn to that student code of conduct to address any issues that come up based on this requirement. So.
Susan?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
This kind of worries me. One, I don't know what repeatedly means. How many? 1, 2, 3? And I know you're saying that each age is a different thing. But like you said with Johnny, 4 times in 1 week, that child shouldn't be in our school.
That's the 4th time. So when you look at step 1, that's the first time. That's the first offense. Step 2 is the second. So
these
no
steps
more than 4 times.
So what you're saying, instead of step, it's you missed it 1 time, you missed it 2 times?
Correct.
You missed it 3 times?
Yes.
I think on 4, you throw them out of school.
And that's what we have there, where we
Well, that's in-school
definitely.
suspension.
And similar to the code of conduct now, like anything else in there, it could escalate quickly.
Yes.
From step 1 right to step 4.
Absolutely.
We're hoping that's not the case, but that's a reality that it could.
And I think on the grade level, depending on the grade level, keeping them in school suspension is not something I favor. That's a parent's problem. Send them home.
We built that in there, and, there's many times when, if a student's refusing to wear a face covering, and we can't send them back to class, we have to have a place, and parents aren't able to pick up their child. I mean, that's something that happens frequently at schools. So we put that in there so that, what's going to happen if this parent refuses to pick up their child, that they would, go to ISS to get instruction there until everything is worked out when it comes to the virtual setting. Because that can take a little bit of time, so we've built that in there. And again, thinking about all of the situations that can occur, like Mr. Stratton said, step 1 can turn into, I'm refusing to wear a mask, so we can go from step 1 to step 4 immediately.
Mr. Alfonso?
To both Mr. Guadagnino's question and to this issue, I think we talked, we'll have to work out details. I'm strongly in favor and recommend and advise that the board give some level of discretion to staff to make these calls. I would say first and foremost that, to your point, I simply would advise caution in treating it primarily as a disciplinary measure. There has been a lot of discussion throughout school districts throughout the state because we don't want this to become the armband issue of a political statement. And if it's purely disciplinary, then that might be the consequence. If this just comes to a head for somebody who wants to make a lawsuit out of something. So the thought is that first it's going to try and encourage, try and take less disciplinary response pieces. There are some districts that are looking at it as it won't be a disciplinary, but it'll be a non-disciplinary change in placement directly to virtual.
That's correct.
So we would like, I urge that the concept is that we'd like to give some flexibility and certainly an opportunity for the policy to deal with that and the superintendent's procedures to give him some discretion there. At some point in time, it is a disciplinary issue if it's overt insubordination, but insubordination isn't a level 4 offense, I don't think, in and of itself. It's situational. So we're going to have to really work this carefully and very, very measuredly in treating it as a disciplinary issue.
Go
ahead.
So in a perfect world, everything works nicely, but we know that we don't live in a perfect world, and we have every spectrum of student we can possibly think of. I'm a teacher, and there's a, say, 14-year-old student in my class takes off the mask and just fake coughs all over the classroom. What do I do with that student? Legally, what do I do?
So that, depending, again, that's when we would go back through our student code of conduct. Policies that I've looked at really outlined many different scenarios, like you're saying, but if that's the case and they're coughing all over everything, that's really a classroom disruption.
That's defiance.
I'm sorry?
That's defiance.
And we have codes that in our student code of conduct that administrators can use depending on those situations that happen because of face coverings.
So again, just kind of thinking it through, I'm not blessed with the opportunity to do it live, but it would be, please, student, don't do that. They do it. There's a defiance there. There's the classroom disruption. It escalates. At the time they then issue another directive, then there's another defiance of that. Student gets moved out of the classroom in that circumstance. Now the immediate problem is resolved in that the student's no longer in the classroom. It becomes the administrative problem at that point in time to determine whether or not out-of-school suspension is appropriate. We're still going to provide services because we are required by law to provide services. But that would be the time that, in my mind, the superintendent might have the ability through these procedures to assess, is this appropriate for a non-disciplinary change in placement or a disciplinary measure? There will be some flexibility in doing that. The non-disciplinary change in placement, to me, would be safest from the perspective of trying to get into a bunch of litigation about whether you can or should or shouldn't, or federal cases about the free speech issue. But the default would be certainly to give at least some discretion at the school and the superintendent level to figure out where it should go.
I think there should be a zero tolerance for any kind of defiance.
I think the steps that you've outlined are fair. You certainly have your warnings, your request for cooperation built into this. You also have that parent conference built in where maybe the option will be, okay, digital, virtual, you pick it. If you're sitting there right now as a parent and telling me you're not going to do this, then we've got to look at a different placement because we can't allow continuous disruptions in a classroom setting, a school setting. It's bad enough under normal situations. This is not even close to normal.
Right.
And I'm sorry to jump in, but I'm sure and I don't know, in evolving this thing, that would be almost an appropriate circumstance to say, look, this isn't a disciplinary change in placement. You're saying that you will not allow your student to wear a mask. Then you're going to get a non-disciplinary change in placement to digital learning.
Right.
it won't show up as a suspension or expulsion.
That's correct.
It's going to hurt you for your transcript purposes, but you're not going to be necessarily welcome in the bricks and mortar.
And we're not in any way depriving them of an education, the opportunity for an education.
Gina, let me ask you, if someone comes to school with an offensive message on their mask, just like on their clothes.
That would be a dress code violation.
Okay, and so will they be given the opportunity to be given a disposable mask?
Yes.
And that mask removed without any discipline, or?
Yes, so we'll follow our student code of conduct in regards to dress code, and in that student code of conduct, the first time a student is out of dress code, they get a warning. Just like a T-shirt that has something, we usually have them change it, or a parent brings up another T-shirt. The same will happen with the face covering. Yep.
Gina, are you finished? I'm sorry.
I am.
Are there other questions for Gina?
No, but this is fluid, so they'll come up.
I'm sorry, what, sir?
This is no, but this is very fluid, so they'll come up again.
I'm sure if
Oh, I don't know, Dennis.
Please, pretty please. So, I haven't really, I'd hope to talk a little bit more about this, but it is very fluid. We're moving fast in a lot of the stuff. I think that we'd have to look at how to implement the policy portion of this. Because when it's all said and done, I mean, I think the superintendent has a great deal of authority within our policies right now to do appropriate things in the event of an emergency. We're certain. This plan, in large measure, is part of those powers. It's blended between the superintendent. I think it's appropriate that it's come before the board for approval and adoption because it's something that affects everybody. But we're going to have to talk about the procedures that we'd employ if the board is of the mind to adopt this as a policy. And I certainly think it's appropriate. Then we may have to tier that to say we'll do a part of it as an emergency rulemaking exercise. We'll do that part, and there are provisions of law that say you can't keep that forever, that you'd have to adopt it as an emergency to impose it immediately if that's the course of action the board wants to do. And then we would have to move forward with an additional adoption of a policy that says, okay, we've made it a permanent policy. It's a big, long dissertation on why, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Emergency rules only last 90 days.
This, I believe, we're tentatively approving this. The superintendent can enact this, and we would have to come back and our next, it's a typical policy. You have to wait 28 days, 30 days, and it comes back for final approval. Is that what you're?
Unless you do it as an emergency. And if you do it as an emergency, the emergency could be you would take action to adopt an emergency at your next board meeting, which is already set just for the budget hearing. But you could approve it.
No, our next meeting is more than budget.
No.
Well, it's set for the budget, and, I mean, it's the follow-up. So that would be an
It's the whole
appropriate time
shebang.
Right.
Pages of,
Take action at that time to adopt it.
at the 28th,
At the 28th.
which is just a week from now.
Right. So you
Okay.
adopt it, you don't have to give 28 days notice when you do an emergency.
Okay.
You adopt it as the emergency, and then you can push it off to up to 90 days to begin the normal rulemaking process.
So the consensus is that we are tentatively approving this today, so we can push that out, let parents know, and then come back and vote on it next week? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's this one, yeah.
If I can just add a thing to this, John, is that, first of all, you've done a terrific job with this, and I really appreciate what you've done. The fact that our teachers are going to be in the schools and wearing their face mask, and the kids, students, right now do not have to, I think it is a no-brainer that we must move with this immediately, that they will be wearing face masks when school starts, because it's not right that we endanger their lives, the lives of their spouses, their families, and everyone else, and including the students, who are in there, who go home, who are interacting all day long. It's something that we all have to wear them. Just like you're wearing them all today, the students have a responsibility to wear them too. Now, I've heard other people who say, well, I don't want my child wearing them. Well, they don't really want to. I said, well, you taught them how to wear shoes, didn't you? So you can teach them how to keep themselves healthy. And I would not want to endanger my child, and I know you wouldn't want to endanger yours or any child out here. I think we're all in agreement. So I think we need to go ahead and just make this happen and not go through all this legal rigmarole of what we're going to do. We're going to do that.
Well, we have to follow the legality on this. What we can do right now is go ahead and give tentative approval to this policy regarding face coverings, and then we will bring it back at the appropriate date for the approvals that Mr. Alfonso is looking for. So at this time, we need a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Hold on, I can't even see my screen here.
His glasses are fogged up.
Just say yes. Thank you for being patient, Susan.
It's all right. That is approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
And
Good work.
we will see it again as another policy vote, I'm sure, at some point, whether it's next week or the meeting in August. We're now down to the addendum items. And at this point, I am going to, there's a couple of topics you all have brought up. We'd like to discuss that, but I'm going to ask a huge favor from you all. I have something I'd like to read. It is lengthy, but I feel that I must in order to explain my thoughts on what we're dealing with at this time. So if you're okay with it, and I mean it's long, so hang in there, please. I have read many articles these past months, some op-ed, but more than not, articles that are research-based. I do not understand why the state leadership even allowed Phase 2 to begin, much less the mandate to open schools. There is a safe, smart, step-by-step plan that was developed by the Reopen Florida Task Force for our state leadership that specifically stated that Phase 2 would, and I quote, begin after the successful conclusion of Phase 1, which includes a downward trajectory of the syndromic and criteria while maintaining adequate health care capacity. This will occur when there is no evidence of a rebound or resurgence of COVID-19 cases and satisfies the benchmarks outlined in this safe, smart, step-by-step plan, end quote. End of quote. At the beginning of Phase 1 on May 18th, the number of positive cases in the state was 5,000. When Phase 2 started on June 5th, the number of cases were at 6,500. For me, that's not a downward trend, and for the state's own rules, that's not a downward trend. The most recent number of cases in Florida now stands at 350,000 plus. Hernando County had 11 cases on May 18th. In the range of 100 around June 5th, and the last numbers I saw just recently was 1,135. I would like to note that the state's plan has the same criteria for opening Phase 3 as it did for Phase 2. There are only 2 paragraphs in the Safe Smart plan that directly relate to education. The rest deals with business, tourism, and hurricane preparedness. The paragraphs on education state that schools should reopen on campus full-time and that post-secondary institutions should continue to implement distance learning and develop a plan to return to campus. Then there is the 143-page Florida DOE plan for reopening schools, which is aligned with the Safe, Smart, Step-by-Step plan. The theory of action, and I didn't make that up, that's the title. The theory of action within the plan, quote, presumes the reopening of schools safely, that schools should open because of a moral purpose to close the achievement gap. There is a statement, end of quote, there is a statement that, quote, Florida can only hit its economic stride if schools are open, and that there should be a step-by-step approach to opening schools. The reopening plan's indicators of success are keeping Florida's entire this is quote, keeping Florida's entire education family safe and healthy. Instill confidence in Floridians to return to school safely. Equip educators for success. And then these two additional things. Enable parents to go to work and increase Floridians' economic mobility and agility. The tough decisions for reopening are being relayed on down to the local levels of government or school districts. For those officials who think only of individual freedoms and not the responsibility that comes with those freedoms, the direction has been clear: no policy, no action. For those of us, school boards, who have had the admonition of funding being held back by the state and national level, what type of incentive is that? To those who know that parenting is tough, please look at what teachers are faced with. Please look at that in terms of the social distancing, the classroom lessons, the protocols, the supplies, the cleaning, the sanitation that are now required for a safer environment in the classroom. The absolute highest risk for schools and employees are in-person brick-mortar classrooms. The lowest risk is digital or virtual Hernando E-School type classes. As a teacher and an educator and a parent, I would not begin to send my own children back to the brick-and-mortar classrooms. And please know that I very well know and understand how tough it is to be a parent 24/7. And in addition to that, having the pressures of providing adequate food, clothing, shelter for children. Most parents, not all, most parents just were never prepared to have their kids all the time and also be their teacher. The Florida chapter of American Academy of Pediatricians has stated in a letter dated July 16th that they believe that every district should be able to decide when and how they reopen in person based on COVID data. There is also a recommendation for additional funding due to the high level of safety measures that are now required. Do I have the faith that our state and national leaders will realize that they have made mistakes in their reopening of schools plan? Maria Konnikova, a writer with a PhD in psychology, has done research into how quickly people make up their minds and then are unwilling to change them. What she has found is that one of the greatest paradoxes in psychology is that while being wrong should make us question our assumptions, it regularly has the opposite effect. Presented with signs that we have made a mistake, we very often choose to discard the evidence and dig in on our prior beliefs. So it is that once they'd committed to reopening, state leaders across the country chose to ignore every scientific early signal that they were wrong and pushed onward into the cresting wave of a resurgent epidemic. And when what is involved are questions not just of policies, but also of values, people retreat even further into their certainties. What I continue to read and think about, I believe that this district has done everything it can to ensure the health and safety of students and staff. I also believe that there is an increasing and rapidly rising number of health and safety reasons why we should not be opening the brick and mortar schools according to our calendar. No matter how much we do it, it will never be enough. We have not had, at a minimum, a 14-day decline in positive COVID cases. Will we by the time school starts? It sure doesn't seem so. Given what I see, there doesn't seem to be enough people making the environment a safe place to be for all of us. I know that what I propose will be a hardship on many, but I cannot justify a decision on my part that will harm any of our 22,000 students and 3,000 employees. I can't agree to an economic decision by the state that penalizes districts and places students, employees, and families at risk. No one can guarantee the health and safety of brick and mortar at this time. Each board member will have to decide on a course of action for the district. For me, it is to go digital and/or e-school for the first 9 weeks of school. Again, I understand that is in complete, it's completely against what we've been mandated. That would allow the district to deliver a solid curriculum with individual student strategies in a safe environment. It could also allow the district to return to brick and mortar at a transitional moment in the school calendar. At the very least, if the other board members cannot support this, and I truly understand why you would not be able to, I'm just a hardhead, okay? You all know that. So at the very least, if you can't support what I'm doing and what I am trying to accomplish, I would hope that you all would consider an August 31st start date with teachers returning perhaps on August 10th. That would be something that would have to be decided. Thank you for your time and patience, as I have taken up a great deal of your time reading this statement. I do appreciate your allowing me to read this. I do know you understand where I'm coming from. You do know that I am directly not going to, in any way, shape, or form, agree to the mandate of the state in requiring us to open brick and mortar 5 days a week by August 31st or face financial penalties. I can't do that. I just can't. That's not who I am. I will not jeopardize, and I will not be held hostage by a rule that I cannot believe in when their own plans say otherwise and encourage the health and safety for all. So with that...
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate your stance in it, and I'd like to tell you what mine is.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know that maybe we could do it in segments of, I'm all in favor of the 31st, but because nobody knows what's going on here. So this might break in 2 weeks, it might get worse in 2 weeks or whatever. But I would like the ability, and Council, you're going to have to help me on this, that we can go to a certain point. Say we pick the 31st. Maybe by the 20th or something, if we check the numbers and we see where we're going, we'll stay on that path. Maybe if they're getting worse, then we'll extend it out further. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is our teachers, pay-wise, because I guess the way it is right now, if we start on the 3rd, the first paycheck would be on the 10th. Is that correct? I don't know who's
Mr. Stratton.
I believe that's correct. Ms. Martin has many scenarios that she can share with you at any time you're ready that show how pay would be affected, potentially with a later start date versus what the current schedule is. But yeah, we have all of that information. And let me be clear, we can make work whatever this board desires. But there are implications that come with any changes that everybody needs to be well aware of. Some are on staff. Some, as Ms. Duval mentioned, obviously have to do with the executive order and funding and option 3 being approved and those things. But just know, we can do whatever you collectively decide and direct us to do.
Well, my stance right now is, if I had children in the public education system, the last thing I would want is to put them together in an environment that I have no knowledge about what's going on. Granted, I believe that our staff is doing everything that is told to them to do, but I'm not sure the instructions that they're getting is everything that we really need to do. Do we clean out the ductworks? Do we do all that kind of stuff? Do we do the work? Whatever it may be, there is nothing inside of me that says I feel somewhat confident that children should be in our school buildings until I hear something better from the turnaround of the amount of cases and all that. I'm all in favor of pushing it back as long as our teachers are not, because you know what? Our teachers are not the greatest paid in the world, and I bet you there's a lot of teachers out there saying, you know what, I've had enough of this field, and I'm going to move into a different industry. And I hate to see that we're going to lose teachers because of lack of pay that we can't pay them for. So my first priority is our students to be safe. Second is for our teachers to make sure that they can put food on their table.
And just to be clear, everybody will be paid, but you have to be at work to be paid. By state statute, I can't pay you if you're not
Right.
working. You have to be there.
But they could be online teaching. Which
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and some will be. Yeah, or depending on where you decide today, someone will be. The only other thing I ask is if you're considering virtual options, I would ask that it be for a period of time. I would not recommend opening up August 10th virtual with the idea of we're going to move to brick and mortar by August 31st to meet the executive order. The amount of training and work and I just don't think we would be prepared for that. So when I said we could do anything you want, that would be the one thing that I would caution you. We would have an extremely difficult time doing that.
I would not, with how I look at what I'm proposing, it would still not be a start date of the 10th. Jimmy?
Yes. If I could speak on the subject, first of all, Susan, that was very eloquent, and I have to sit here and admire what you say, and I agree that we should not endanger our children in any way. What I'm proposing is that we start on the 31st. Not start on the 31st, but extend out to the 31st, so that we will have one more meeting 2 weeks before, which is on our schedule, that if the figures do not show that they are justified, if the figures do not show that they are justifiably going down, if we start on the 31st and 2 weeks later, or 2 weeks earlier, we have a meeting, we can adjust, we can push it up. We don't have to keep it at 31st. If the figures are not going downward, we're not going to jeopardize our children and our teachers. I mean, there's no way I could sit here and do that and sleep at night. And so with that, if we do this, we can buy the time we need, that the schools will start on the 31st, providing that the figures are showing that the COVID figures are going down to the level that is back to that 5%, 6% mark that they were talking about, where it's more in control. But as I see it, every day it's going up, not down. And so if we were to start on the date that we're talking about, we will be placing our teachers in jeopardy and our students in jeopardy. And so by moving to the 31st, it gives us enough time to watch the figures and see what's going on. We have a meeting next week. We'll have another meeting. Then we can also, as Linda said, we can have emergency meetings to find out how it's going and what we're going to do to adjust. At the same time, as John mentioned, we can't start digital before we start schools. They have to start at the same time. If they don't start at the same time, then what happens if a child wants to move from digital back to school? And that would be an impossible task for our district.
Like I said, I'm not asking to move to digital on the 10th.
No, I understand.
That's not.
But that's what we had talked about before, is that we were looking at a date of that date to go ahead and start. I think that would be a disaster for us. I think we need to move to the 31st. We need to give them enough time. On the subject of our teachers, there's no reason why we can't pay them in advance. If we have to have salaries going to our teachers, we shouldn't have to penalize them because we're pushing the date out and they're not working. They're going to have to work 3 weeks later into the season to get enough days in for, the 180, 100, 240, whatever days.
I know you can't see me.
Right, I can't see you because I'm all fogged up. But it's very difficult speaking when you can't see. But I'm sure that we're all in agreement with the way you feel, Susan. My druthers is push it out and not have school until we know everything is safe. And if we went out in a semester, big deal, as long as everybody's safe. But let's go ahead and go to the 31st at least and say this is where we're going to be. But let's go ahead and make a decision on the meeting 2 weeks before the 31st on whether we're going to push it out or whether we're going to go ahead and stay on that date, depending on the figures.
Thank you. Linda?
I think we're all probably in agreement of August 31st as being the date that school starts in some form, or I shouldn't, we haven't heard from Kay yet, so, And I know the position the district is in terms of DOE. If we were to send in Mrs. Duval's plan, it would be rejected, I'm assuming, because it violates the order.
Well, you bet it would.
Right. So here's the question.
No question on that one.
Do we send in the plan with the hopes that we could move forward so the plan won't be rejected? And then we have our emergency meeting if things aren't safe and basically defy the order. There's no other way to say it. Because I'm, definitely in agreement with you. There's no way that any of us are going to vote to send our kids and our employees back to work if it's not safe.
I know that, and that's what really bothers me, I think, is the fact that
we're forced.
We're forced.
All right.
If that wasn't a mandate or an executive order, we would have an entirely different conversation right now, and we would be looking at doing things totally different than where you all are going to go right now. I know that. Yeah. But it is it is difficult to fight the legal battle. I know that.
It is, and what I don't know is, have any districts submitted a plan that defies the order? I looked at the ones that have been approved, and obviously they didn't defy the order. Mr. Stratton, do you have any?
Not that I'm aware of, but
anybody submitted a plan that defies?
Not that I'm aware of, but by starting on the 31st, technically, in my opinion, we would be meeting the approval plan that they're asking for. The language only says that we will start brick and mortar in August. It doesn't specify a date, although we do have to specify our starting date on there.
Right.
So it might bring some attention, but for all intents and purposes, unless Dennis says otherwise, I think it meets what they're asking for. And then, as was mentioned earlier, we have a few meetings between now and then to watch how things go.
Right, exactly.
It's a fluid vote.
Right. I would like to read an email from a student because obviously students have a say in what's happening, and also very sadly to say that I know someone who lives in Hernando who actually passed away from the virus, and it certainly makes it a lot more real for you when you know someone. And very sadly, a Pasco County middle school teacher, you probably heard it on the news, passed away. So I do not, and I know none of you either, want us to be on the news with someone from Hernando. I went to the county commission. I begged for them to help us to do a temporary mandatory mask order, and I was not successful. But that could change too as things get worse or better. But okay, I'm going to read this email from a student because this probably many of you got similar emails from employees, whether it be their spouses, whether it be their parents. So I'm not going to give any identifying information. This student is from Springstead High School, and she said that sadly this will be my second year on the hospital homebound program. I'm in this program because I have an autoimmune disease, and she has had chemo, 25 rounds of chemo, and 8 rounds of chemo and plasma, and spent many, many days in the hospital. Enough about me. We have to get to the point, and you should be requiring face masks in our county schools, because if you don't, it will cause massive issues. Personally, my family have been trying to wrap our heads around the fact that my mom will have to return to school next month. Could you imagine what would happen if a child in her class was a carrier of COVID-19 and she brought it home to me? Well, I think you know what would happen because of my situation. Well, I know what will happen because any doctors have told me I'll end up in ICU and will probably die. I already know your response. She can use her sick leave until it's time, or her FMLA, and I wanted to ask about that. What exactly could our teachers use if they could not come back?
So if you want to finish reading that, when Ms.
Okay,
Martin
sure.
comes up, she can
Sure,
answer that
okay,
question
can
as
answer
well.
that. Okay. Whoops, I'm sorry.
They do have options, is my understanding, so she'll go over those.
My mom is a single mom raising 2 girls and neck deep, as you can imagine, in medical bills since I just got out of the hospital for a 12-day stay. I know our family isn't alone. I know many other teachers' kids have other underlying conditions and will be put at risk due to some incompetence. How would that look if kids were dying and not because of anything they did, if they stayed home and wore a mask and not had to leave home, maybe they would be a different situation. They caught it because you didn't insist that children in Hernando County schools wear masks. It would add an extra layer of protection to high-risk families who are doing everything right, but you aren't protecting teachers and their families. You will preach that children don't get COVID-19, and I guess the latest is 30% have tested positive in Tampa Bay that have tested. But schools aren't just filled with kids, they have adults in it also. Also, the claims that kids can't get it is completely false, and we know that now. 3 wings of St. Joseph's Children's Hospital right now is dedicated to children with COVID-19 and are completely full, and some had to get moved to other locations. You already implemented masks in the courthouse. Does that mean you care for them more than our teachers and families? My mom will be trying her best to be staying safe and keep our families safe. But if you don't take actions to implement face masks in our schools and look at what's happening, then you don't care about our teachers and families. So I think, again, we talk about our employees, but we also have to look at it for our employees' families and their kids. And so many of our teachers have kids in the program. So I am, definitely in favor of August 31st, and I guess Heather's going to come up, but maybe Kay, you would like to speak first before she comes up to talk about.
I'm going to speak in favor of August the 31st. I'm also going to speak in favor of Susan's point. I'm speaking in favor of it, Susan. I don't know that I, at this point, am going to be able to vote for it.
Understood.
But I am going to say publicly, and I'm going to follow up with what Linda said, if we could, as a county, bring ourselves to mandate masks in the county, we would not be in a perfect position, but we would be in a much healthier place. And so for those who might be listening and might be able to influence others, wearing masks in Hernando County would not be a perfect solution, but it would decrease the incidence and we would get much closer to the goal much quicker. So.
At this point, it seems like you all would like to start school on the 31st. Mr. Stratton?
Okay, so now we need to talk about what that looks like and any implications that come with that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Since we're addressing the students and the teachers, can we address the parents and maybe move that when they can make that decision, maybe a week or something?
Again, I recommend, we can do whatever you want, but I recommend we leave the date the same so we can plan accordingly, because what moving to August 31st does do is gives principal and staff time to implement what the parents are going to want. If we back it up at all, I wouldn't back it up much. But I want parents to understand if their situation changes, we're going to change with them. Really, the e-school one is the one we need to, once you're locked into that, it's a little bit more, but that doesn't start until we start school. So they really have that time that if their situation changes to reach out to us and reach out to their principal and let them know. But we need this information from parents so we can start planning accordingly.
From what I get out of parents, I think
Is your mic?
Good morning. I get a lot of parents that feel like they're being pushed into making that decision, just like we're being pushed, but they're more on a time factor of immediate decision. So if we can give them some more time to see how the world is changing, maybe they'll have a little more comfortability. I think they have trust in us, but they just don't know the rest of the world like we don't.
I think John will probably work with the principals very quickly to have an answer on that.
Okay.
It is, this scheduling is a nightmare to begin with. Now we're throwing 3 options in there, and it just becomes a logistical nightmare for the planning purposes of what teachers are going to be doing every single period, whether it's, you could have combinations of a teacher doing just all straight line brick and mortar, they could be doing digital, they could be doing combinations, but you don't know how to set anything up until you actually get a firm confirmation that this is what they're going to do.
Okay.
And even then, we know things, parents can change their minds, and there's going to be, we're going to have to deal with that. I can say one thing right now, and a month from now, if things aren't any better, now I'm going to change my mind.
Right.
And we have to accommodate that. And there's going to be a lot of last-minute planning taking place to just keep up with all the changes. So I do understand why you're asking for that. I'm hoping that John can work with administrators and maybe give a little bit of extra time, but not a whole lot.
Well,
No, I think every day is,
if I could,
Tough.
Susan,
Yes, Jimmy?
since we're pushing to the 31st, which takes us out another 20 days, if we just give them one more week, because we're just having this meeting today to determine this, and we're talking about them giving it to us on Friday, if we gave it to them another Friday, I think it would give them enough time to make that decision.
I'm going to defer to John and the
One week.
administrators to make that decision, whether it's an additional 2 days, 3 days,
Yes.
or a week. I don't want to,
Just a little latitude.
I don't want,
Yeah,
I
let
don't
me-
want to just say that's the
Right.
way it has to be. I don't think that's fair to the people who are planning
So
this out.
let Gina and I meet with principals and get their input. They're very nervous and chomping at the bit to receive this information because they cannot start building their classes until they know. So I might have 40 teachers, but I don't know what my 40 teachers are doing yet.
right.
And we're late in the game. We know this back in March on any given other year. It was some changes, but we know this early on. That's my only reason for advocating getting the information into our hands as quickly as possible. And we're not going to turn you away. I'll give you an example. If a parent signs up for digital or even e-school at this point, if their situation changes where they may not have been working before, now they go to work, they need a place, they prefer brick and mortar, we're not going to turn them away. We're going to make it work. But staff, and particularly principals, need that information as soon as possible.
So I think with the new third option in there, that there might be a lot of parents that can take their kids to work or work with their kids in the same time and all that kind of stuff. But I think anything that we could do to show that we need for them to make a decision, but we want to give you much time. What is it, Friday that's due?
Yeah, and we could.
Can we give them the weekend and
Well, that's what I was
Monday or
just thinking.
Tuesday?
We can extend it through the weekend, get the information on, close it out Sunday night. I'm just talking out loud here, Gina. Close it out Sunday night, so it gives them the whole weekend, and then really principals wouldn't start digging into it until that Monday anyways.
Yeah.
So we could certainly do that.
Thank you.
Having had to do schedules at the college level, which is much easier than at K through 12, we did it 6 months in advance and then tweaked it even before it went public. So scheduling is, especially with the 3 options and the fact that there's not a lot of wiggle room in how we do the 3 options that were in the mandate. I would say, Monday would be a gift to do that. And, we all, I don't know who's the contact person on the web if parents have questions about.
I believe it goes through, we have a site set up there, and there's a Q&A on there, and they can also submit questions right on there. And Karen and her team are responding, or Gina, Heather, myself. It really just depends on what the question is and where it lands, but that's the best spot, is to go to the Q&A on the website. There's a COVID page, and if it's something we haven't thought of, type it in, and we'll get back with you.
Okay, and probably we as board members will get questions too, so.
Oh, I'm sure you have, and will continue.
Right,
Yes.
right.
This might not be a popular one with staff, but is that Q&A open over the weekend now that you extended it?
The Q&A never closes.
Okay.
That's always open. So that whole page is where we put all of our COVID-related information when it comes to what we're doing to prepare and what to expect.
Kay, you have a question?
I just wanted to echo what the other folks are talking about in terms of trying to schedule students. And when I was scheduling students, I was scheduling a much smaller number than what we're talking about here. And it was, every time we needed to do it, a great challenge. So we know that you can't wait forever.
Other questions? Heather?
Okay, well, in anticipation of this discussion today, I put together some scenarios, but it sounds like there's pretty clear consensus on pushing the start date to August 31st, so we probably don't even need to talk about those other scenarios. So August 31st for students as a start date would end school June 18th. That would be for students and our non-instructional employees. For teachers would be August 24th as a start and June 22nd as an end. And I have this and I can provide it to the board. The biggest issue is what that does to paychecks. Obviously, if you're not here and we haven't started the contract year, by statute, we cannot pay. However, we did work out some scenarios where we can run special payroll runs and eliminate that time gap for employees when they start later to get the paychecks later. So for example, for teachers, when they would come back on the 24th, they would receive a paycheck on the 24th. So it is correct, they won't get their paycheck as they were planning on getting originally as August 10th, but they would get one on August 24th. And for our non-instruct, what we could do is they would return on August 31st, and they would receive a paycheck on August 31st. We will run special runs in between the payrolls. But what that does, that I just want to make sure the board is aware of, it does have a potential impact financially that in the event an employee doesn't return or they retire or resign earlier than anticipated, there will be overpayments because essentially we are paying paychecks for 0 days worked. We're going to issue them before they work, not before their contract year starts, but before they work. So there is a potential budget impactor, and I just think the board needs to be aware of that. I can't tell you how much that'll be because it'll depend on how many employees would actually be in that scenario. There are issues with health insurance deductions and ensuring that we get the correct amount of deductions within a calendar year. So it may impact skip checks of employees, but we would work that out with the unions. But we could do everything we can to minimize the impact. So no one would lose money and we wouldn't be pushing the paychecks back further.
Any questions?
I have one.
Okay. Sorry, Linda.
That's okay, sure. What if teachers came back on the 17th and that would give them 2 weeks, which I'm thinking if any of you have ever been to an open house, it's just packed with people that I was thinking open houses could be staggered and maybe parents would have an opportunity to talk to teachers about the different options and it would give them more time to work together and on some of the options. It just seems like 1 week is not enough, but would that be a possibility? I don't even know if the teachers want it. I've been told some of them would like that would be, very helpful, but I understand that's a bargaining issue, and that would have to be decided.
So if we did that and teachers came back on the 17th, we would just reverse it. We would do a special payroll run. They'd get their paycheck on the 17th and their next paycheck on the 24th. So that's just internally, we would work that out. What that would do is to maintain the 197-day contract year that we have with teachers and not cost an additional salary amount, there would have to be 5 days exchanged throughout the year that are currently non-student contact days. And there are days throughout the year that are non-student contact, but that would require us to bargain that and reach agreement. We do have a bargaining session scheduled with both unions tomorrow in anticipation of this, so if that is something the board gave direction on, we could take that to the union.
We have three, I'm sorry, may I go ahead?
Sure.
We have currently 3 grading days, correct?
That is correct.
We also have November 11th.
That's a holiday, that would be an issue, but you have an in-service, 3 grading days, and 2 post-school days that you could utilize.
So there are options to take care of that if the unions agree to it.
Yes.
Fairly easy options, in my opinion.
I mean, if that's something the board wants to do, we certainly could take it to the union. It would require, again, agreement to do that. That wouldn't be something that we could automatically impose without going through a process.
I understand that. I have a tendency to agree with Linda on this. I think the 17th, we're switching, okay? Again, we're switching into something that we haven't really dealt with. And that is the digital learning platforms. I think it would be good for teachers to be as prepared as possible for that potential of teaching digitally, okay? We all know that preschool week is already filled with so many things that just we have to do. So by designating another 5 days for implementing that digital plan, I think would be a very good way for staff to be ready to tackle the start date on the 31st. And again, my opinion.
So
I see that.
I agree with that.
what about teachers coming back to the regular time? Give them as much time as possible.
Yes.
Yes, the ones who are teaching brick and mortar, they could always use the time, and especially
They need the extra time.
if the state pivots and shuts down, then I would be encouraging the staff to be looking at, okay, you're teaching brick and mortar, but you really need to get prepared and have this ready to go in case of. Always trying to stay 2 steps ahead.
I think we need to give them as much time as they possibly need.
So I think it's a beneficial thing.
So if we're talking about teachers coming back the 10th,
No, 17th.
17.
No, she says, I said just
I think Mr.
keep it the way it
Guadagnino
was.
said the 10th. That's why I'm talking about that. On the 17th, we could trade out those days.
Right.
If we're talking about backing it up to the 10th, they don't have enough days non-student contact to make them up. And students are going to have to make these days up that we're pushing back, so we need the teachers there. The only other option is payment. I can tell you it costs about $2.4 million to pay our teachers for 5 days. So, other than doing that, the only way would be to look at swapping out the 7, was it 7 I mentioned? 6 days that I mentioned that are non-student contact days.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, I was looking at the 17th because of the ease of swapping out days.
Yes.
That's all. But it still gives 2 weeks preparation time, setting up room time, getting all those little intangibles that when you walk in, you suddenly are faced with if you're there, and now you've got a classroom and it's going to be set up. There's not enough ESTs on any campus to make that happen quickly. There's just not. It's unrealistic. So as a teacher, I would be looking at my classroom and how can I make this happen? Probably lots of trading going on between teachers for chairs, desks, whatever. But that's a time-consuming thing to
Are they gonna
rearrange just to social distance.
Is there any plans of having physical help for teachers that, you're talking about moving tables and all that kind of stuff?
Well, yeah.
Without killing the
We have
custodians?
The custodial staff moves furniture around every year for that kind of stuff. It would be that staff located at that school that typically does that. So if you're talking about particularly just moving of furniture?
Whatever they need to do to make it a safe zone.
Yeah, it happens every year. That's not a new, moving furniture is not a new thing. Every year we pull it out, wax the floors, put it back multiple times. So they're pretty skilled at that.
Are there, Jimmy, you have a question?
Yes, no, not a question. I'm in total agreement with you and Linda, both.
Okay.
And also with Gus as to moving it to the 17th.
Okay. John?
So it sounds like we have consensus definitely to postpone the start to the 31st. Now the difference becomes, one, we start on the 31st for students and 24th for teachers, or two, in a bargaining session, it's determined that we can start on the 17th for teachers and again 31st for students. So the difference is 1 week for teachers or 2 weeks for teachers is what I'm hearing. But either way, students start the 31st.
And to,
Yeah.
and to that effect, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I want to say, that can go in as our plan. I want to keep saying that. That can go in as our plan to DOE, but it, in my opinion, is not cast in concrete.
We'll have, I think, at least 2 meetings, if not 3, before then to continue to
Watch
monitor and
the
discuss.
numbers,
Yeah.
right. And then if we submit that plan, it's not in violation at this point. But I'm, again, Susan, I think your plan is great.
Has DOE put a waiver on 180 days?
The days, yes, but keep in mind, it's 180 days, but the equivalent of 700 and 900 minutes, something like
yeah.
that. So it's really the minutes that, there's not a waiver that I'm seeing on that. I could be mistaken, but I'm not seeing it. So we still have to meet the instructional minutes, and that's why they're being so tight on this third option with what they're calling assurances. They want to make sure you're getting the minutes in. You're taking attendance, you're doing everything as if they were brick and mortar, because that's how we collect the money for, the credit for the student, the money for that. E-school's a whole different animal, and so is Florida Virtual. The way they count it is completion. They're not doing daily attendance or any of those things. So to answer your question, we are still required for minimum minutes, unless, Dennis, you have other thoughts. And then 2, we are still required for what are called the old Carnegie units for high school seat time of 135 hours.
So what I'm hearing, I believe I'm hearing from the board, let's make it clear now, we would, in discussing with Dennis, we need a motion. We're going to actually do this twice, 2 different dates. We need a motion to start school on August 31st. So, yes, it's fluid. So, we need a motion, start school on August 31st. Need a motion and a second.
I will so move to start,
I don't,
We're not-
yeah, she can do it online. She just, just give Kelly a second. Yes, ma'am? What? You're not, stop. Are you ready? Okay. All right. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item?
See.
All right. I want you to know before I vote, and this may not be legal, I don't care.
Kind of defogger.
It's approved right now by 4 votes. The motion is to start school on August 31st. You know how I feel. My vote does not mean that I'm voting for the 10th. Please understand that. It is a vote of based on what I just said. So please understand that in my heart of hearts. And that's adopted 4-1. The next item is the return date for teachers. May I have a motion? You all had indicated the 17th would be okay. So now may I have a motion for the start date for teachers to return to school for August 17th?
Can I add, Mr. Alfonso, the 17th would require the bargaining unit to agree to it? So I don't know how we want to word this, as if not the 24th. I don't know. I'd ask your recommendation on that.
Thanks, John. So I guess here's how I look at it. I think if you just do it and say that's the start date, it is the start date, and if not, it just goes to an impact, which means it's going to get bargained. Because I don't know how you can otherwise have a board directive that says we think we want to do it on this date, but maybe this subject to negotiations. It wouldn't be board action. So I don't know, Heather, if you have thoughts as to the...
Approve it as the 24th as the start date, and understand that we're going to go to the table and negotiate that. And just like any MOU, they're trading out days, so we would just treat it like any other agreement.
That makes sense. So that would be still pulling it for the start date would be the 24th.
Right.
And keep in mind, we'll be back together a week from tomorrow to make any amendments to anything we've done.
Okay, so, Kelly, are you ready with that? Okay, so a motion and a second for a return date of August 17th. 24th, I was right. I'm looking at dates, sorry. A start date of the 24th for teachers to return to school. Motion and a second.
So that's a week before opening, not 2 weeks.
I said this.
It's a week before, Gus, but we're going to try to bargain to see if the bargaining unit
Start
is
on the
interested
31st.
in a previous week.
They start on the, wait a minute.
I thought we said the 17th.
17th, we did.
17th.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But right now you have 5 days of preschool, which would be August 24th.
Right.
You're asking for 10 days preschool, which they would have to trade out.
Correct, but that still is a bargaining.
Correct.
So we can, as a board, we can say, this is our preference.
That's right.
And you all just going to deal with it after that, knowing that that's what we would like, and you have our reasons why.
But if you now take the motion on August 24th, that aligns with your current student calendar that you just voted on for August 30th.
Recognize that. We recognize to do something different.
And if there isn't an agreement tomorrow at the bargaining table, then where do we go from there?
We're back a week from now.
So
Are we going to wait that long to let teachers know what their start date is?
I am going to hope against all hopes that this can be resolved tomorrow to start on the 17th.
So, Madam Chair, could I throw out the option to avoid, I understand it may be a very small risk, that there wouldn't be resolution on this, but to avoid that problem, would the board consider tabling this issue? Because you're still going to meet next week, and you can address it next week as final action rather than tentative action.
Because technically, the board only approves a start and end date for students normally under the calendar, and then we backfill start dates for employees. So the only action that's required by the board is the student day.
Which it has not always been 5 days.
Correct.
So it is entirely possible.
But we have a contract in place right now that has 5 days.
So you'd be voting to basically change your contract without the union's agreement?
Yeah. So if we don't take a vote and just leave it with students as is, and then next week we can provide to you if we reached agreement or not on the additional days.
Is it a wish of this board that the teachers start on August 17th? Is it a wish of the board? Not voting, just...
It is my wish that if the teachers feel they need that extra week, I'm for it. If they feel they don't need it, I'm for that too. But I'd like to give them the option.
Same here.
My wish is that they start on the 17th, for the reasons we've already identified, which is nothing less than just preparation for what we are about to enter.
My wish is they start on the 17th too, but respecting whatever decision they make.
I would vote for, I mean, my choice for them would be the 17th. But again, they make the decision, we don't. But it seems like the teacher starting the 17th would be good for everybody, especially the teachers.
So do we need to vote on that?
I would say no. I don't think y'all don't generally vote on that. So you've indicated, it's like consensus. You've indicated what you want, and bargaining's going to happen. So
That's why I was asking for what do you wish? We won't vote. I'd love to, but we're letting the teachers, union teachers know that we would really like them to do this, and these are the reasons why. Yes, it has to be bargained, but we'll see what we'll see what happens.
Yep.
So Kelly, you want?
Happy bargaining.
All right. General Counsel, any comments? Oh, of course.
No. All right. I'll defer. I said enough today. Thanks.
Susan, could we maybe hear from staff to get parents a little bit like, what are we doing on recess? What are we doing on serving food in the cafeteria and those types? I know there's a huge task force here that's worked very hard on this. Could maybe some of them talk about what's going to be happening? And
it is in the plan. It is very.
I think maybe some reassurance might be beneficial. Got lots of questions about
You mean like if a student finds a mask on the floor, what do you do?
If is lunch going to be in the classroom, or they're going to the cafeteria? I read where there's only going to be 2 minutes. How can they sanitize the cafeteria and things like that? That maybe some reassurance.
Lori.
You're on.
Sorry, Lori, I hate to put you on the spot, but I thought it might help in the end if we got really good clarification on how meals will be done and breakfast, lunch, and that type of thing.
Well, I will say this, that like many other things, it really varies from school to school. I mean, when you look at something like, obviously all of this hinges on how many kids are actually in the brick and mortar school compared to not in there. So there's that. Additionally, you have, the difference between serving at a Chocochatty is very different than a serving at a Springstead or an Explorer K-8. So it's very unique from school to school, and we've been working with the different administrative teams to figure out what is the best way to ensure that there's not students standing in lines, which means multiple, what we call serving locations. And I think one of the videos kind of showed the carts and how those are movable, and we can move those to where either students are coming into school at breakfast or at lunch, different locations, so that we can spread out the number of what we call serving lines, so there's not just 1 or 2 lines where we have multiple classes standing in. and/or students. So really trying to distance where students would go to get food. The other thing is what that looks like as far as what the student options will be. We are working very diligently to put what we call, we'll call them lunch boxes, for lack of a better term. We have a cold option at elementary and a hot option. So every day elementary, they would have a choice of cold or hot. Those are in boxes of, blue boxes or red boxes or bags. And in those boxes is everything that they need for what we call a reimbursable lunch, or make up the components for a nutritionally balanced lunch. We've tried to make those options exciting for students, something a little bit different than what they've seen on the menus in years before. All of their condiments and napkins and all of those things will come in those items. As far as what it looks like school by school, where the student will be eating, I think that is different at every school. Some have decided to eat in the cafeteria with different social distancing things in place. Obviously, it's, again, those when feasible. I can assure you the administrators would tell you. Some schools at breakfast have decided to eat in the classroom, but not necessarily all. So we're really kind of working with each administrator, school by school, to figure out what that is going to look like. We're doing everything that we can to ensure that the food that we provide is safe, and that the students, whether they're traveling with the food to the classroom and those kind of things, again, are packaged and safe for the students. The only other thing is with our distance learners, really trying to get the word out that those that are choosing to do distance home learning, as opposed to virtual school, but distance home learners, we will have a process in place where those households, if they choose to, just those households, will be able to come through in kind of like a drive-through fashion after school has started, but before the end of the school day. So we have the time frame of about 9:45 to 10:15 right now, that those households can come through, and on Monday and Wednesday, we would provide them meals for breakfast and for lunch for that week. So again, that's only for the distance home learners. That is not the same for virtual school. We are not by law allowed to feed our virtual school students.
So just identifying those students is not going to be easy then.
Yeah, so again, we're kind of in the same boat as many of the other schools with trying to identify who our distance home learners are, and making sure that we have that option, the meal option, available to that household, knowing that they will have to bring some sort of identification that links the student to the parent that may be coming to get that meal. Again, it gets a little complicated. I don't make these rules, the federal government does.
A little complicated? It sounds very complex to me.
Because with distance home learning, they consider that to be the student is enrolled in the brick and mortar school. Though they might not be attending the brick and mortar school, they're enrolled in that school, and that is why we can provide meals for them different from our virtual learners.
Yeah, e-school.
So
knowing how many of those as soon as you can will be very helpful, I'm sure.
Yes, right now we're having the conversation. I don't know if that's 2 they're going to pick up in the drive-through or 200. I don't know, but that we're in the same boat with, every other administrator, just trying to figure out what that looks like day by day. And
well, you did an amazing job for the last months of school, so I have no doubt you'll have a great plan in place.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
hopefully that'll maybe make the parents feel, but there will be some à la carte. But some parents, again, were concerned about, actually paying for the à la carte and how
Well,
you do
I mean,
that.
we always have, we strongly encourage that there will be à la carte available to students, and what we envision that look like is, think about kind of like a stadium type setting, that we have someone kind of pushing around a cart, and our hope is to have an iPad that the student can just tell us their number, we put it in, and then they have money on their account from which to purchase that. That is what we're envisioning at.
So students wouldn't have contact with the iPad
Right,
then at
so
all.
we found some other ways and some
To
things
do
some
it.
other
Okay,
districts
so-
are doing to be able to limit that.
To
And
do
also
that.
so they wouldn't have to stand in line as well, or touch anything for that matter.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I know it's an enormous task.
Thanks, Lori. Other questions, Linda?
I know there were some suggestions about, and again, having gone to the celebration of the opening of the new playground, in terms of, are we going to, with recess at Chocochatty, are we going to kind of change the time so there's not so many students, or maybe you don't know that? I know that's the administrators.
Yeah.
To limit, and some parents were saying, perhaps more recesses would maybe, in terms of, taking off the mask, like, are there any changes for recess planned that you're aware
So
of?
I haven't seen the actual plans from schools.
Yet, okay.
We've had lots of conversations. The principals are working really hard to basically reduce the number of students out at recess and in the cafeterias at any one time. So how that's working in everybody's individual master schedule, I haven't physically laid eyes on, but I do know that it is part of what they were preparing right now, along with their scheduling and so on. So that is definitely one of the directives we gave, is to look at the resource setting and reduce the amount of students in any one location. So there could be a rotation. And the law doesn't say recess has to be outside either. So there is that opportunity for unstructured time.
Library, media center, or
Exactly,
something like that.
within other locations. So they have that leeway as well.
Okay. Of course, I'm also very concerned about our ESC students, and because many of them, require a lot of direct contact, and like reducing the numbers or additional resources. Is any of that being looked at for our special needs students at all? I know.
So we would do what we needed to do to be in compliance with their services, and that was part of the conversation we had with principals on Thursday, is students who choose this digital home learning option, if they are ESE, their services continue through that digital format. So principals really, the sooner they get the data as far as enrollments, the easier it will be for them to plan and make sure that the services are lined up for those students who have chosen either option. We have to provide those services across all three options. So we don't know what that's going to look like yet as far as what's needed, because we don't have the numbers. So, but we have to provide the services that are on their IEP for sure. And I spoke with Kathy. She's, we're ready to really dive in and look at that, make sure that all those additional services, OT, PT, speech, all of that is lined up with the students who are choosing to do the digital home learning as well as the brick and mortar. So it's hard to answer your question until we have those hard numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I think Kathy had mentioned that they'd already had over 70 meetings set up to deal with individual situations, so I know they're keeping on top of it. Yeah.
Yes, her staff started with looking and reaching out to families for our medically fragile students.
Yeah,
To
especially.
really talk through what it's going to look like for them in the fall, as well as our students who are on access points because that is a little bit more difficult to make sure that they're getting exactly what they need on a digital platform. So making sure all those things are lined up. So they are holding a lot of meetings.
A big undertaking, I know. Okay.
But they did get a jump start on it, so we're happy about that.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any comments, questions? Okay. Linda, anything else?
I just want to say thank you to our district staff, our superintendent, and everybody on the task force. I think you've done an amazing job, and I guess probably I've always said prayer is the most powerful medicine, and I think we probably all need a lot of that. So thank you.
Jimmy?
I'm very happy that we move forward with the 31st date. I think that I'm hoping that the teachers will come to a consensus. If they need the extra days to prepare, I think that we should give it to them. And I'm hoping that bargaining will work it out with our school district. I think we're moving in the right direction. It gives us the time to make a decision on whether we're going to proceed after the 31st and how we're going to proceed. And so with that, I think we had a good day. I think we moved forward. I really appreciate your comments, Susan. I want you to know I feel as strong as you do about that. And so we're going to do the right thing. I'm very confident.
Gus?
You know, I was sitting here thinking that under normal circumstances, your staff has a summer break and they come back and they're fired up and they're ready to go. And boy, they got to be coming into this school year totally exhausted, staff and everybody. But I'm really proud of the rising to the occasion for our staff, and it's unbelievable the things that they are accomplishing in such a short amount of time. And I pray for everybody's help.
Thank you. I think you all know my thoughts already, so Mr. Stratton.
Well, this was a special board meeting, and I just appreciate each of you agreeing to be here today and without any hesitation whatsoever and tackle what is a tough subject for the unseeable future here. And I commend this board for coming together and doing that and being willing to go out on a limb and support somebody on a limb when we want to think outside of the box and sometimes outside of what the state might be thinking. So again, thank you, and I will echo that staff has been incredible. Excuse me, we've worked with the unions on these plans, and it's the amount of countless hours, and I know because I hear from them on weekends, I talk to them on weekends and nights, and there's just so much effort by so many great people, and I appreciate each of you for doing that. And it's all about keeping everybody safe and providing a top-notch education. So, thanks.
And at 11:14 on...
Anything else? Okay. I'm sorry, I meant to ask this question earlier. Mr. Stratton, would it be at all possible for the health department to go from school to school, so if the teachers come back on August 17th to do any COVID testing at all? Is that something that we could request for our staff to do? I know that I stayed for the Board of County Commissioners meeting. It's a 14-day delay for not only testing but results. But I'm thinking that, to me, we're asking our teachers to come in and, they're going to be exposed to so many students. And I was just wondering if we could make that request, that they come and visit each of our schools and test our teachers.
Yeah.
And staff, if that would be possible.
I don't want to speak for them, but we can request anything.
Okay,
but I will tell you, in my conversations with them, they are overwhelmed also. I'm not sure, but I will tell you, we're trying to contract with a company out there, or companies, whoever we can find, to provide testing for our staff with a very short turnaround period, not the 14
wonderful.
Days.
Okay.
We haven't been able to procure that yet, but we are trying because we know the cycle and scenario can spiral pretty quickly And we
In a
need people at
school
work.
setting.
We need healthy people at work. We need sick people to stay home, but we have to educate, we have to do all those things. So we're trying to find a company now that, and there's a cost involved in that, but that's okay. It's worth every penny because we have to have staff. When we do come back to brick and mortar, we have to have, well, in general too, but we have to have staff in place to educate kids. So I will ask, but I don't know if they have the time.
It just seems like that would be a priority, but because of, again, if we have a sick teacher or a staff member, that can go through the whole school and affect so many. And there's several stories about things like that happening. Well, please ask. Okay, thank you.
Susan?
At 11
Susan,
Whoa.
no, I just want to follow
Sorry.
up on that, and I know that what I am about to say is not the most popular position to take, but I'm going to follow your example. I'm going to repeat again that if we could, all of us in the county, commit to wearing masks, our staff and our students would be healthy, and we wouldn't struggle so much with how are we going to educate all of our students. That's my plea.
Appreciate it. Two things we can do easily: socially distance, face coverings. At 11:17 on July 20th, the special meeting of the school board is now adjourned. Thank you very much.